Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto marries Fire Daiymo's daughter, Konoha bashing part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. It was October 10th, 6 years after the Kyuubi attack. The entirety of Konoha was filled with the cheers and celebrations to the death of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The bars were filled to the brim with celebrating shinobi, the festival was brimming with joy. It appeared as if everyone was having a good time, appeared as the key word. On the other side of town a young child, blonde-haired and with beautiful cerulean blue eyes, as sitting alone in his run-down apartment complex. His name was Naruto Uzumaki, the container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. He was an orphan, he had no friends, and he never knew love. He had been sitting in the apartment since morning. His Gigi had told him that he was to remain in his apartment on this day, his own birthday. It was funny really, the day that was supposed to be the best in the year, was actually the worst. Naruto would get constant beatings, and on his birthdays they were the worst. Last year he had gone to the festival and was attacked by a group of drunks. He had been cornered in an alley and beaten near death. When he awoke he found himself in the hospital, again. He had been literally thrown out the next day, only to return the day after with an even worse condition. After that his Gigi told him that he was to stay inside on his birthdays, and so here he was, alone, waiting for his Gigi to unlock the door the next day. Naruto decided to go to the kitchen and check on his project. He got up and quickly went to the kitchen where his project was. Sitting right there was probably the most beautiful plant anyone had ever seen. It had beautiful leaves that had a perfect texture. The flowers drooped in the morning, but at night they stood up to show a beautiful blue flower. It was probably the rarest and most difficult flower to grow in all of Fire Country. It was called a tenshirin, or angel's orchid. It was so difficult to grow that no one was able to tell if the legends about it were true. It is said that when the orchid reaches the end of its first pollination cycle, the stems release nectar that is said to cure all poisons. It was also said that the orchid could regrow a destroyed limb in under a few hours. Some even said that it had such a high water content that it was incapable of being burned. Naruto had gotten a seedling when he was on a trip with his Gigi to the Fire Daimyo. He remembered that day so well that he could see it every time he closed his eyes. Flashback. The Sandaime had gone to the Fire Daimyo to secure a meeting with the newest daimyo of High no Kuni. Since he was too afraid to leave Naruto in Konoha without his protection, he decided to bring him with him. When they arrived, Naruto was quivering. Over the years he had been abused so badly that he became extremely wary of other people, fearing they would hurt him. Naruto had lost many a chance to make friends because of it. The daimyo personally met Sarutobi at the gates with a young girl. She was about a year or so older than Naruto. She was introduced as the daimyo's daughter. Naruto quickly hid behind his Gigi's legs. The girl saw this and walked over to him. "Hi, what's your name?" Naruto looked at the girl with a quivering expression. Naruto, Uzumaki." He edged away as she got a little closer. "Naruto." She seemed to go into thought before she shouted with glee, "That's a nice name." She smiled at the blonde and grabbed his hand. "Hey, come play with me." She dragged Naruto from behind the Hokage and went off to the nearby koi pond. The daimyo chuckled at his daughter's actions. "Well, Sarutobi, it seems that my daughter likes the boy. How about we hold off on negotiations and go check out the little ones?" Sarutobi smiled at the daimyo. "I guess so, Sora. After all, how often do we get a chance like this?" He pulled out a camera as the two walked over to the two kids. Naruto was twiddling his feet as the daimyo's daughter dragged him over to the koi pond. She had long black hair, lovely golden eyes with a single black slit. Naruto was scared by her eyes. She dragged him over to the koi pond and she sat down, dragging Naruto with her. The two spent most of the day together, just sitting by the koi pond. Naruto slowly got closer and closer to her. When he got close enough that the two could hold hands, he actually smiled. It was the first real smile he had in a long time. But his mood dropped when he saw that it was getting dark out. The girl saw this and asked him, "What's wrong, Naruto?" Naruto let a sad sigh out and spoke. "After today I probably won't ever say you again. You're the first friend I ever had. I don't want to lose that." The girl smiled sadly and tugged into her pocket. She pulled out a small bag and gave it to Naruto. "This is the rarest flower in all of High no Kuni. I want you to grow it, Naruto, and I promise that one day I will come to Konoha and marry you." Naruto's eyes widened at that proclamation. Marry him? He smiled a goofy grin and yelled out, "I promise you, I will grow this plant no matter how hard it is to grow. I will not rest until it is the most beautiful flower in all of High no Kuni, Daiymo." The girl smiled and gave him a peck on the cheek. Not being able to take that much in one day, he fainted. End flashback. Since that day he had spent every day of every hour nurturing the plant into what it is now. For some reason he was great with plants. One time he managed to bring a tree that was near death back to life just by watering and weeding it. Sure, he spent a bit of time talking to the tree, not that it could answer. But he always felt he needed to speak to every plant he saw. He never understood why. Naruto was about to water the plant with some special mineral water when he heard banging at the door. He was about to go and see if it was his Gigi when he heard it crash open and he heard angry shouts, "Where's the demon? Find it, this is the night it dies." Naruto was terrified and quickly grabbed the plant. He ran to the other side of the room and opened a special hath he had spent a month working on. He quickly opened the door and then shut it behind him before jumping down the chute. He made sure his flower did not get hit on the walls as he shot out of the chute into the street. He tumbled in a way that he would take most of the blow while the Tenshinhan would not get hurt. He quickly got up and was about to head for the Hokage Tower when, "It's the demon, get it." Naruto turned to see a shinobi being flanked by about a dozen civilians running at him. He quickly tucked tail and ran as fast as he could. He ran into an alley and hid behind a trash can. He watched as the mob passed by and breathed a sigh of relief. He got up, but he was knocked down when he felt a crushing blow delivered to his chest. He skidded and hit the end of the alley. He looked up and saw that the alley went a different route. He got up and was about to run when he saw another angry mob at the other end of the alley. He began to cower in fear as a couple Junin closed in on him. "Time to die, demon." One of them pulled out a flame-bladed sai and stabbed Naruto in the arm. Naruto squealed in pain as he dropped to the ground, but held a tight grip on his flower. The shinobi and civilians kept on beating him, but when they saw that he was ignoring the blows, paying close attention to the flower in his arms, they decided to take a different approach. "So, that little plant is important to you, huh? Well, let's see how you like us burning it." The shinobi grabbed the flower and tried to pry it from his arms. Naruto held onto it tightly as the shinobi tugged harder. "Let go of the plant, demon." Naruto only held tighter as the shinobi tired to pry it from his arms. "No, leave me alone, leave me alone." Naruto screamed, "Leave me alone." As he screamed, a massive output of chakra was felt as the shinobi was knocked away from Naruto. The shinobi pulled out a katana. "That's it, you shit. Die." He ran at Naruto and was about to stab him in the heart, when the sword suddenly stopped. The shinobi was shocked and felt a pressure around his limbs. He looked down and was shocked to see a vine wrapped around his arm. He looked down and found that it was keeping him from attacking the blonde. The civilians screamed, "The demon's breaking free, kill it." The civilians charged only to be stopped by hundreds of vines grabbing their limbs and hanging them off the ground. The shinobi saw this and were shocked to the core. That's the bloodline of the Shodaime, the one that allowed him to control demons, but how can, oh my god, what have we done? Realization passed through the shinobi as they realized that only a human could command the Mokuden, but one shinobi clearly was an idiot. "How dare you use the Shodaime's bloodline, you demon." He ran through some hand seals, Cage Shuriken no Jutsu, A single shuriken he threw became hundreds as they shot at the blonde, not caring that many civilians would die because of it. The civilians watched as the shuriken came towards them, they closed their eyes and waited for the inevitable. Naruto saw the shuriken coming and began thinking a mile a minute, what do I do? They may hate me, but I don't want them to die, someone please help them. As if the vines were listening, they dropped the civilians and began shifting and turning into sheets. The sheets folded like paper and shot towards the shuriken. The shuriken stopped as each piece sliced the shuriken in half. The civilians watched as the shuriken fell to the ground as the sheets unfolded, they were paper. The paper went straight towards Naruto and began dissipating into raw chakra. As the chakra entered the body, Naruto collapsed. The shinobi ran towards the blonde as the one that threw the shuriken was restrained. The civilians looked at Naruto, confused and afraid. Why would the demon save them? The shinobi were mentally hitting themselves for being so stupid. The one who led the mob grabbed Naruto as carefully as he could. He was amazed that the blonde was holding so tightly on the plant. It must have meant a lot to the blonde. The shinobi quickly turned around and ran to the hospital, saying that the damage he did was not life-threatening. The next day, council chambers. When Sarutobi had heard of Naruto's condition, he was outraged. But he was happy that Naruto finally unlocked the Mokuden. Now the villagers could not say he was Kyuubi. When he told the council, he was hoping for good reactions. However, this is not what he expected. The council demanded to know how it was that the demon brat had the Mokuden of the Shodaime. Others were proposing that he be used as a breeding stock. Others, like the Hyuga and Uchiha clans, were proposing marriage contracts. Finally, Sarutobi had enough. Shut up. Now, before all of you start going crazy, I will say this once and for all. I do not know how Naruto has the Mokuden. However, since he has the Mokuden, it must mean he's a descendant of the Shodaime. The council erupted in conversation again. Sandaime-sama, if he is in fact a descendant of the Shodaime, why is it he has not shown his ability in the Mokuden until now? The Sandaime glared at the councilman. Because the Mokuden, unlike other Kekkei Genkei, does not activate until the holder of the bloodline reaches a certain age. Even then, they have to be in a life-threatening position to activate it. The Shinobi Council looked down. They knew that Naruto was merely a scroll and Kyuubi the kunai. It disgusted them that Naruto was treated worse than the most despicable of criminals. A member of the Shinobi Council spoke up. It was the head of the Med Nin division, Hokage-sama. With all due respect, I would like to do a blood test to see how closely Naruto is related to the Shodaime. Perhaps we can find his parents. The Sandaime cringed. Minato was dead, and there had been no sign of Kushina since after the attack. He had sent Anbu to look for her to find absolutely nothing. A member of the clan committee spoke up. Sandaime-sama, if Naruto has the Mokuden, then that means he is the heir of the Senju family. If that is the case, we must contact Tsunade. If we cannot locate his parents, then she should be able to raise him. The Sandaime went into thought. He had been trying for years to get a reason for Tsunade to come back. Maybe the chance of meeting family would be enough to bring her back. I agree. The Hokage flicked his wrist as an Anbu appeared. Have someone locate Tsunade. Tell her we found a relative of hers. The Anbu did a quick bow and left. Sarutobi was about to address the council when Fugaku spoke up. Hokage-sama, what of the regards to the boy's future? If he is indeed a member of the Senju family, then I humbly request that he be betrothed to a member of my clan. The Senju and Uchiha were rivals, and the chance for an alliance will be most beneficial to the future of our clans. Fugaku was interrupted by Hiashi, who did a quick glare at the Uchiha clan head. Fugaku, you only wish to increase the strength of your clan. Besides, I feel it would be more beneficial if he were to marry my firstborn. So far she shows no signs of becoming a true clan head. And I have seen how she takes glances at the boy. As such, I wish to arrange a marriage between the two. The council continued in uproar until Danzo shouted. Why not give him to me? I can make him the most powerful shinobi in Konoha. With his skills in Mokuden, And whatever that paper technique is, along with the Kyuubi's chakra, we could train him to surpass even the greatest of shinobi. None would ever dare oppose our power. The civilians at first agreed with Danzo, until Sum snapped at the war hawk. Danzo, you old fool. Do you honestly think we will let you take care of the pup after what we found in your Nei headquarters, or have you forgotten why we shut down your little group? Danzo sneered at the woman as he sat down. Sarutobi sighed in frustration. He finally made his decision. I will allow the medical corps to take a blood sample and attempt to find his parentage. Once Tsunade returns, we may be able to find some more information on the subject. As for the marriage contracts, come to my office later and we will discuss that matter. Sarutobi got up and was about to call the meeting to an end when an Anbu appeared in the room. Sandaime-sama, Naruto is gone. The council looked at the Anbu as if he had grown a second head. What? The Anbu cowered in fear as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a note. This is all I found, my lord. The Sandaime took the letter and read it. Dear Gigi, I am leaving Konoha for a while. If I can't even be safe in my own apartment on my birthday, then I can't stay here until I am strong enough to defend myself. I will return in time to take the final year of the Genin exams. Yours truly, Naruto Uzumaki. Sarutobi sighed as he read the letter. It seems Naruto has left the village. He will return for the final year of the Genin exams. The civilians screamed in outrage. How can you be so casual about his? The last known heir of the Senju clan that possessed the Mokuden has left the village, at the possibility of dying. Taking the Mokuden with him. The Sandaime glared at the civilians. You did not care for him until after he got his bloodline, and since Naruto does not possess the Senju name, he is not under the jurisdiction of the clan committee. Also, since the Mokuden only occurred in the Shodaime, we have not registered it as a Konoha bloodline, thus we can do nothing about it. The head of the civilian council screamed in outrage, her pink hair flopping everywhere. He is a relation of the Senju clan, we cannot risk their extinction. I move for a vote that we send our hunter nin squads out and capture him, lock high up until he is of suitable breeding age, and then have him impregnate women who will carry the Senju clan's legacy. Many of the civilians agreed, but a quick burst of killing intent shut them up. So you would have Naruto be a father to children of women who he will never even know. I will not allow any of you to do that to him. He will choose who he wishes to marry, and there is not a single thing any of you can say to change my mind. The head of the clan committee spoke up. But Sandaime-sama, you realize that Naruto falls under the Clan Restoration Act. As such, whether he likes it or not, he will have to impregnate multiple women to build up his clan. Sarutobi sighed as he remembered that law. The only one who managed to avoid that law was Minato, and that was because Kushina was so damn dangerous that no one wanted to mess with her. I understand, we will discuss this further. Those who wish to propose marriage contracts, please come to my office later. Dismissed. The council members left the room. Several went to the Sandaime's office, including the heads of the Hyuga, Uchiha, Kurama, and other clans. Others like Shina Haruno got their hired Anbu units and ordered them to locate Naruto Uzumaki at once. Meanwhile, Naruto was leaving the forest surrounding Konoha's walls. He had escaped about 3 hours ago and had avoided being spotted by the local shinobi. He quickly took out a map that the Sandaime gave him and looked through it. Alright, so I am here, he pointed at a point on the map, and Konoha is here, he pointed another place. So far I have several options. I could head to Suna, Nami, or any other countries, but which one? Naruto crossed his legs and looked at the map. Suna is too far from here, so it will take a long time for me to get there. And I don't have the supplies to get there either. Nami seems to be the best bet. I can stock up and head to Suna afterwards. And with that decision, Naruto got his bag and carefully opened it. In it was a specially made box. He opened it to see the Tenshinhan in it. After he had tended to the plant, he packed up and headed towards Nami no Kuni, unaware that he was being followed. The mercenary Anbu unit was in the trees of Konoha's forests, trying to locate the last known carrier of the Senju bloodline limit. The Anbu unit had been tasked by Shina Haruno, head of the civilian council, to locate and restrain him. He would then be locked up in a special safe house where he would be mentally conditioned to do as his masters told him. Once he reaches breeding age, he would impregnate several women and they would be conditioned to serve Danzo in the civilian council. The Anbu unit was made up of mostly exiled clan members. A side branch member of the Inuzuka family, she was exiled because she was incapable of bonding with any canines. She was however able to bond with a silver wolf in the Forest of Death. Once the clan leaders found out, she was welcomed back into the clan, but she was permanently banished when she turned her wolf partner into a cloak out of sheer rage. Her name was Yurufu Inuzuka. There was also a former Hyuga branch member. He was the only member of the Hyuga clan that died, and then came back to life. He had died on the day of the Kyuubi attack, but the Kyuubi's chakra somehow jump-started his system. His mark remained, but his eyes would never be able to wield the Byakugan, nor would he ever be able to pass on the Byakugan. His name was Hiroshi Hyuga. The next member was a young man. He was a member of the Nara, Yamanaka, and Akamichi families, but he was exiled from the clans when he broke several of their laws, selling clan pills to outsiders, setting fire to a Nara deer farm, and using his mind-based attacks to gain. His name was Chinomaru Akamichi Yamanaka Nara. The next member of the squad was a young swordsman. He had failed the academy 3 times, and he was not allowed another chance at the graduation exam. His ability to use chakra was destroyed when he was 12 by the Kyuubi attack as it fried his systems. He as well as his older brother had the same disease that their father had. His name is Kazuma Gecko. The final member of the team was a pale-skinned man. His eyes were a golden color with black snake slits. His nails were black and sharpened, his fangs laced with toxic venom. He had a slim but muscular texture to his body. His name was Hebamaru, the son of Orochimaru. The 5 had been recruited by the underground mercenary guild in Konoha. Each one had their reasons for joining. Yurufu loved to hunt exotic things, Hiroshi had nowhere to go, same with Chinomaru. Kazuma had grown tired of being compared to his brother, and Hebamaru was hated for being the snake Sanin's son. Hebamaru looked around when he saw an indent in the dirt. Everyone, come here. The group followed Hebamaru and landed around the indent. Yurufu, see if it's the sprat. Yurufu sniffed the ground and grinned. Yep, it's the kid all right. The group grinned, but Hebamaru kept a calm demeanor. Which way did he go? Yurufu sniffed the ground again. She tilted her head towards her left and smirked. Good, let's go. The group ran down the path Yurufu indicated, fully intent on capturing their target. With Naruto. Naruto was dead tired. He had spent the last week walking towards Nami no Kuni, had eaten berries and birds for food, and he had no source of water since he was on the sea coast. Naruto sighed as he continued to walk. Maybe this wasn't the smartest plan. I am only what, 6? How the hell am I supposed to take care of myself out here? Naruto continued walking. He stopped when he heard people jeering. He looked in the direction he heard it from and found a dock. He looked closer and saw there was a group of kids about his age surrounding a little boy. He ran over to find a sight that severely pissed him off. 3 boys about a year older than him were surrounding and picking on a kid at the age of 3. Naruto quickly ran across the bridge as he listened to their conversation. Because of your new father, our parents punished us. The clear ring leader said. Yeah, how's about we show you your place, brat? The boy pushed the little kid to the ground. Please, leave me alone. The kids laughed at the boy as the last kid pulled up a plank of wood. Sayonara, shit stain. The kid swung the plank and. Hey. The kids turned around to see a blonde-haired kid with blue eyes staring at them. Leave the kid alone. The kids laughed at the statement. And who's going to make us, you? Naruto smirked and ran at the boys while they were still trying to recover from laughing so hard. He grabbed the ring leader's hair and brought his head down, smashing his knee into his face. He then grabbed the plank out of the boy's hand and swung it right across the other two's face. The three tumbled down as Naruto slammed his foot on the ringleader's back. You were saying? The other two quickly got up and ran as fast as they could. Naruto quickly kicked the leader in the stomach as he too ran off. He then turned towards the young boy. He was quivering a bit as Naruto approached him. Hey kid, you alright? The boy was shocked at Naruto's kindness, but he answered. Why yes, mister. Naruto chuckled at the statement. Call me Naruto, what's your name? The boy seemed to perk up. Inari, thank you for helping me. Naruto helped Inari to his feet, but when Inari cringed, Naruto looked at his leg. It was injured and swollen. He doubted he would be walking for a few days. Okay kid, looks like either you will have to limp back home, or I will carry you. Naruto did a goofy grin. The second option is probably better. He scooped Inari up in his arms and began walking down the docks. So, which way is your house? Inari got a meek smile on his face as he answered. It's across the river. Naruto mentally face-faulted at that, but I know someone who can take us across. Naruto smiled as Inari directed him to where they could get across. The man who took them across brought them over free of charge. When Naruto asked why Inari was all the way out here, he said it was because the boy's parents offered to take him around while his Ka-chan had the day off. The two walked through town, well more so Naruto walked through town while Inari was on his back. They finally arrived at a nice little house on the shore. Naruto walked up to the door and used his foot to knock since his arms were being used to carry Inari. He only had to wait a few moments when the door opened to reveal a very beautiful woman with silky black hair and lovely brown eyes. Her eyes widened when she saw Inari. Inari, what happened? Naruto was about to explain when the woman grabbed his shirt and dragged him in. He followed the woman. She dragged him all the way to the living room and sat him on the couch while she tended to Inari's sprain. She cast a sharp glance at Naruto. What happened to my baby? Naruto immediately felt scared and began to sweat. He quickly explained what happened. When the woman glanced at Inari for confirmation, he quickly nodded. The woman gave a nervous smile at Naruto. Sorry, it's just that too many people pick on my little Inari, but why was he being attacked by those boys? I am going to have a talk with their mothers about this. Naruto smiled at the woman as the door opened. In walked a man with black spiky hair and an X-shaped scar on his chin. He seemed to wear fisherman's clothes. He looked at the scene in the living room and gave a stern look at the blonde. Have you been harassing my son? Naruto quickly retold the story and the man smiled. Good, I am sorry, but I don't like seeing my son get hurt. Anyways, why don't you stay over for dinner, unless of course you have to be somewhere. Naruto smiled. Sure, why not? The family sat down to a meal of fish and salad. Halfway through the meal, an elderly man came in. His name was Tsunade and he was Inari's grandfather. Once he was told of how Naruto helped out Inari, he grabbed the boy in a headlock. Ha, you're alright kid. Hey, how's about ya come with me tomorrow? I can teach ya a bit of stuff while we're there. Naruto smiles at Tsunade. Sure, why not? I have nowhere to be for a couple years. The family was shocked by this. He didn't have to be anywhere for a couple years. What about his parents and family? Tsunade spoke up. But Naruto, won't your friends and family get lonely? Naruto dropped his smile at the mention of friends. He looked down before he let a sad smile cross his features. No, I have no friends, and my family is either dead or abandoned me. The table went silent when they heard the abandoned part. It's no big deal, but since I had to grow up fast, I never really had time for fun. Tsunade walked over to Naruto and wrapped him up in a hug. Oh, you poor thing. Inari walked over and hugged his leg while Tsunade and Kaiza spoke to each other at the side. Kaiza, how about you and I teach the boy some things? If what he says is true, then he probably doesn't know about taking care of himself outside of wherever he lives. I'll teach him some building techniques and you teach him how to fish. Maybe we can get Tsunade to teach him how to cook. Kaiza though for a minute, he would love to do this, but he also thought that perhaps they should just adopt him, but Naruto seemed to be like him, preferring to go far rather than tie himself anywhere. Tsunade was his only exception, he loved her just like he did his adopted son. Alright, we can ask him after dinner and see what we can teach him. The two agreed and went back to eating. Afterwards Naruto agreed to learning from them. The next day Tsunade brought Naruto with him to his building project. They were working on building a pipe system that would lead to a water filtration plant. Since they were on the ocean, the usual freshwater areas were actually salty, not the best thing to drink. While they were building, Tsunade showed Naruto the basic pipes. He also showed Naruto the filter system. Naruto soaked up all the information and made sure he remembered. After all, since he was going to be traveling a lot, he needed to learn this stuff. He even helped out Tsunade. Some of the pipes were too small for Tsunade to work on, so Naruto had to help out a bit. Naruto crawled through the pipes and tightened the bolts. When the day was done, they went home. Kaiza brought Naruto with him and showed him how to fish. After half an hour of fishing, Kaiza started a conversation. So Naruto, what was life back home? He turned to see Naruto's eyes gloss over as he got a sad expression on his face. Kaiza quirked an eyebrow at this. I would rather not talk about it, not yet anyways. Naruto went back to fishing, but Kaiza seemed insistent. You may feel better if you talk about it. Naruto turned towards Kaiza and spoke. No, I won't. Kaiza sighed, but he got a thoughtful expression on his features. What could have happened in the village to make it so Naruto does not even want to talk about it? He decided to ask him later and went back to fishing. He suddenly felt something jerk on his fishing pole. Kaiza began tugging on the line as he reeled in what was on the line. He kept letting off some slack as more and more splashes were shown. Naruto got up and helped Tsunade tug on the line. Finally, after half an hour of pulling, they finally reeled in a large swordfish. Once they brought it back to the house, they cut it up. Half of what was ate that night was eaten as sushi, the rest was stir-fired or grilled. Naruto had helped cook the dinner and had learned about the various spices. The same process repeated with Naruto taking part in wood chopping, shopping. He even babysat Inari for a little while. The two were playing in the park when the same three bullies came up to them with reinforcements. Hey brat, we still haven't paid you back for how your stepdad got us in trouble. This time we brought some friends. He indicated the 10 or so kids behind him. Naruto got up and got into a basic academy stance in front of Inari. You want him, you go through me. A large kid with a wooden plank ran forwards and kicked Naruto in the ribs. Love to. He turned his head towards the group of kids. Get him. The kids ran at Inari, who quickly curled into a ball as they pulled out a bunch of things to hit him with. Naruto tried to get up, but he was smacked across the back of his head by a wooden plank as he fell to the ground. Blanking out as darkness claimed him. Mindscape. Naruto groggily opened his eyes to find himself in knee-deep water. He quickly shot up and looked around. He was in a sewer, but the walls were covered in roots. He looked around as he saw the wood begin to peel like paper. He began walking down the halls of the sewer. He kept taking what seemed like random directions, but he felt as if he was going the right way. Naruto went through another passage when he saw a large gate. It seemed like it was bolt shut and it was covered with hundreds of vines and roots. He looked closer to find an imprint of a hand. He placed his hand over it and it immediately glowed red. He watched as the doors cracked open as the tree roots suddenly tore themselves away from the door and pierced the ground behind him. He began to panic as a fierce wind picked up and pulled him in. He tried to make a grab for one of the roots, but he found himself unable to grab anything. He was finally pulled through the doorway as the gates closed with a slam. The wind stopped as he began to tumble. He pushed himself up and brushed himself off. He looked around as he saw the room light up with hundreds of seals wrapping around the room. He saw a pedestal with 2 palm prints on them and walked over. What the hell? What is going on? Naruto sighed as he placed his palms on the hand prints. Oh well, the handprints glowed as his body was charged with a warm energy, it was calm and serene. Outside of mindscape, Naruto suddenly awoke and looked up. The group of boys were about to wail a beating on Inari that would permanently injure him. He threw an open palm strike as a mass of tree roots ripped from the ground and wrapped around the boys. He then twisted his wrist as the roots went upwards, suspending the boys in the air. The large boy that knocked him down grabbed a plank of wood and threw it at Naruto. Naruto swung his arm as the board was sliced in half. The large boy was shocked until he looked at Naruto's hand, then he was terrified. Naruto's hand had turned into a blade that looked like it was made from paper. The blade quickly shifted and folded until it was a simple hand again. Naruto ran at the boy and kicked him in the stomach and then threw his arm out as a root came out of the ground and wrapped around the large boy. Naruto walked over to the bound 6-year-old and sneered in his face, "How do you like me now?" He added a bit of killing intent to make his point. Naruto walked back to the house with Inari that evening. It was the last evening he would be staying there, so he decided that he would cook dinner tonight. Inari and him were the only ones home since Kaiza went fishing, Tsunade was shopping, and Tsunade was still building that water filter. Naruto had gone to the nearby beach and began casting out his lines. He brought in about 3 salmon, 1 blowfish, and a lobster. He quickly grabbed the fish and ran back to the house. On his way he stopped when he saw a patch of herbs. He looked through them and found the perfect herbs for the dish he was planning. When he got home, Inari had already set the table and was getting out some cups. Naruto looked at the clock. He only had 3 hours to cook the meal before they all got home. Naruto quickly pulled up a stool and got to work. After 2.5 hours, Naruto and Inari had finished setting the table with time to spare. The two sat down together and watched the sunset. "Hey Naruto," Naruto turned to Inari, "why are you making dinner? Mommy makes really great food." Naruto smiled as he sighed. "Because I am leaving tomorrow." Inari grabbed Naruto's arm and clung to it. "No, don't leave, the bullies will come back, please don't leave." Naruto wrapped an arm around Inari's shoulders and answered. "Inari, if I fight all of your battles, what is going to happen if I die?" Inari got a defiant smile on his face. "You won't die. Nobody can kill Naruto ni-san." Naruto smiled as he looked at the sunset. "I wish that were true. I truly wish that were true." Naruto perked up when he remembered something. He looked into his pocket and pulled out a kunai knife. He looked at it. It was a blunt kunai with a rusted tint to it. It was his favorite kunai. He had gotten it from his first sensei. She had helped him out so much. But a week later she was fired and replaced with a cruel teacher who would belittle him in front of everyone. Naruto placed the kunai in Inari's hand. "Inari, out of all my possessions, this is one of my most important. I am giving you this, and I promise I will return for it." Inari let a tear fall from his eye. "Promise?" Naruto smiled. "I promise." The two looked as the sun finally passed over the horizon. In Konoha, Fugaku Uchiha was growing irate. He had sent out those 5 Anbu over 2 weeks ago to find the last wielder of the Mokudan and they still had not come back. He was growing very annoyed. The Sandaime had approved all 3 of the contracts from the Kurama, Hyuga, and Uchiha clans. But at the moment it seemed like the other 2 clans would be able to fulfill the contract. None of the Uchiha parents were willing to give up their daughters to the heir of the Senju. It seemed that tensions between the 2 clans still existed. Fugaku was about to go through the documents, seeing if he could find some sort of loophole when he heard knocking on his office door. Enter. The door opened to reveal Funu Uchiha. She alone was the last remaining descendant of the original leader of the Uchiha clan. She was considered a monster amongst the clan, same with both of her parents before their deaths. "Funu, what are you doing here?" Funu walked forwards. She was about 8 years old, and she already showed potential past Itachi, but because of her heritage she was never considered for early promotion. "Fugaku-sama, I understand you are having difficulties in finding someone to wed the heir of the Senju." Fugaku narrowed his eyes. "Yes, What does it concern you? Funu spoke and released an imposing aura. I wish to be the one offered to the Senju heir. Fugaku's eyes widened. Funu was extremely picky about who she hung out with, and now she was asking to be the one who married the heir of the Senju, the heir to her ancestor's rival. Why? Since you are a direct descendant of Madara, I expected you to hate the Senju more than anyone. Funu sighed and continued. It is for the exact reason that he is the heir of my ancestor's greatest enemy. I wish to see how powerful he is. Plus, our children would be incredibly powerful, thus giving the Uchiha clan both the Sharingan, the Mokudan, and whatever abilities he learns. Fugaku got a thoughtful expression on his face. She raised valid points, and since she was not the heiress of the clan, then all of their children would be directly controlled by the clan head, namely Itachi or Sasuke. He inwardly smiled. It looked like his coup would be easier than he thought. Very well, I will sign in your name and have it delivered to the Hokage Tower tomorrow. Funu bowed and left Fugaku's office. Fugaku ever noticed the smile on her face. Fugaku, you fool, you just secured that your clan will fall. For once I marry my Naruto-kun, I will leave this clan forever, taking the ultimate Sharingan with me. Funu's eyes turned red, the fully developed Sharingan in her eye, then it suddenly shifted into a symbol that looked like a biohazard sign. Hyuga Compound. The Hyuga Compound was locked up, serene, quiet, until Hiashi told Hinata she was now betrothed to Naruto. The elders were rolling on the floor clutching their ears when Hinata let loose a fangirl scream that would probably take down the Kyuubi itself. Hinata herself was jumping up and down on her father's stomach saying thank you over and over again. The branch members that were watching could barely contain their laughter, except for one Neji Hyuga. Hinata had a massive grin on her face as she was bouncing around, screaming how their wedding night would be one to remember, the flowers, the dress, the chance of a family. Hitomi, Hinata's mother, was standing off to the side with her newly born daughter Hanabi. She was smiling that her daughter got the man of her dreams, just like she got with her Hiashi-kun. Hiashi, he was starting to regret telling her before she turned genin. After all, that was when the two would get married. It was also the day after that Naruto would marry the heiress of the Kurama clan. He had no idea how Fugaku was going to get Naruto to marry someone of his clan. But he had to smile at the fact that his daughter was so happy. With Naruto, 2 weeks later. Naruto had left Nami no Kuni the day after. He had then headed straight towards Suna. He had stopped in 3 cities on the way. One where he had gambled a bit. He remembered that it was Tanzaku town or something like that. He had won over 200,000 ryo at an old gambling hut. The place after that became so popular that the business increased tenfold. Naruto had just arrived in a border town of Suna. He had rented a motel room in the middle-class district. He had quickly gone to bed the moment his body touched the mattress. The next day Naruto went to a nearby weapons shop where he hoped to buy some equipment. Naruto had not set 2 feet in the door when he saw someone enter an alley dragging a black sack. He was curious as to what was going on and walked towards the alley. He looked to find a red-haired teen wearing a sand-colored cloak and a scorpion mark on his armband. He looked closer to find that he had a Suna headband, but it had a slash mark through it. He looked closer and watched as the man opened the sack to reveal a dead body. Naruto watched in fascination as he inspected the body. He combed the body over with a calculating eye as he ran diagnostic jutsu after diagnostic jutsu over the body. He seemed to be pleased with the body as he smiled. He quickly packed up the bag. Naruto tried to get a closer look, crash, and knocked over a bucket of glass. The man turned around and saw Naruto. He quickly turned and ran as fast as he could. He looked behind to see that the man was slowly following him. Naruto ran even faster. He turned down an alley that had a bunch of trash cans. He ran to the end of the alley and it pointed 2 different ways. He turned to see the same man casually walking down the alley. Naruto panicked and ran left. He exited the alley into a large crowd of people. They were all dressed in masks, some were Oni masks, tiger masks, hell there was a mask of every possible animal you could think of. Naruto turned and looked behind him, the man wasn't there. He breathed a sigh of relief. Excuse me, child. Naruto's blood turned cold when he heard that emotionless voice. Might I ask what you were doing watching me? Naruto swallowed as he kept saying the same mantra in his head, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Naruto was about to run when he felt a cold hand grasp his shoulder. He slowly turned around as his eyes widened when he saw who was behind him. It was the exact same man from the alley. Naruto did the only thing he could think of at that moment. Thump! Naruto fainted in the middle of the street. The man bent down and looked at Naruto. Such a strange child. Well, might as well take him with me. No sense leaving him in the middle of the street. The man picked him up and carried him in his arms as he began thinking, the child is clearly only 6 or 7 years old, and by the looks of it he is an orphan. I wonder. The man smiled to himself as he carried Naruto to his apartment in the red light district. Akasuna no Sasori may have finally found an apprentice. Naruto slowly opened his eyes. He groaned as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes. Damn, what happened to me? Naruto pushed himself up and fully opened his eyes. He was in a ratty room with holes in the walls. The ceiling looked like it had mold growing on it. He looked to find that there was a window. It was cracked, but it was still a window. He walked over to the window and looked at the curtains. They looked like they had been eaten by moths. Naruto looked around. Why the hell was he here? The last thing he remembered was that he was running away from some man who had a corpse in a bag. He accidentally caught the mont's attention and, oh shit. Naruto began to panic as he looked around, praying that he could somehow escape. He ran to the door and grabbed the handle as he turned it, to find that it was locked. He looked at the window and ran to it. He opened it up, sending a few shards of glass in random directions. He stuck his leg through the window and was about to jump out, when he saw how high up he was. The room was at least on the 3rd floor. No, make that 4th floor. Naruto went back in the room and looked around, trying to find some way to get out. He looked around, but he stopped in his tracks when he heard the doorknob begin to click. He looked around as the door opened. Akasuna no Sasori walked through the doorway carrying a black bag the size of a man. He looked around and spoke, looks like he got away. He walked and put the bag on the bed, or did he? He slowly stepped around the room. If he did escape, how did he get away? And if he is still here, where is? He snapped his head to the left towards his closet. He twitched his fingers as the closet flew off its hinges, revealing Naruto cowering in the corner. He quickly ran to the window and was about to jump out of it when Sasori quickly shunshined behind Naruto, grabbing his shirt. Naruto struggled as he tried to get out of the mont's grip. Let me go, I haven't done anything to you. Sasori threw Naruto on the bed right next to the bag. Naruto looked up in fear. Sasori walked forward and sat on the side of the bed. Naruto was confused. Why was the man not trying to kill him? Sasori let a dry chuckle escape his lips. Don't worry, child, I have no intention of hurting you. In fact, I brought you here because you seem to be in bad condition. A good thing too, it was supposed to get pretty cold this evening, and with what you are wearing you won't last long. Naruto looked down and had to agree. All he was wearing was a loose set of rags, a worn-out pair of socks, and only had a bag of crackers. He lost the rest of the food when he was jumped by a pair of kids 3 days ago. Naruto nervously smiled but let his face fall. Sasori saw this. I also saw a bit of potential in you, boy. Naruto looked up. You seem to have massive chakra reserves, enough that you will have a severe amount of trouble depleting them, but since you are young, and if taught to control it properly, you could be great. Naruto smiled at the mont's praise. Thus, I wish to take you as my apprentice. Naruto looked up in shock. Really? Sasori nodded his head. Yada, so when do we start? In Tanzaku town, Tsunade and Shizune were carrying a sack of loot. After Tsunade had lost all of their grocery money, Shizune had pushed her out of the way. In less than 10 minutes they had managed to get 10,000 ryo. Shizune chose to carry the bag. Tsunade however wanted to continue gambling. Come on Shizune, just 1,000 ryo. Shizune turned to her master. No. 500 ryo. No. 400 ryo. No. Tsunade-sama, you need to get out of this gambling habit of yours. We already have debts with several influential individuals. We don't need any more fees we have to pay when we don't even have enough to pay for the debts we have. Tsunade slumped her shoulders. The two had been traveling for the last 6 years. They were both registered as Konoha shinobi, but they chose to leave Konoha. The last time they were in Konoha was 6 years ago when Minato's child was about to be born. If they had not been there then Kushina would have died in childbirth. After the Kyuubi attacked she watched as the hospital was set ablaze. She ran into the hospital and found that almost everyone was affected by the Kyuubi's malevolent chakra, most of them going into shock. The next day she fled the village with Shizune when she was told that Kushina and her child was dead. The two entered their hotel room, Tsunade Senju. They looked to find a Konoha Anbu standing in the corner. Tsunade immediately got angry. What do you want? The Anbu stood at attention. Tsunade Senju, I have an S-class message that I must give to you. Alone, he turned towards Shizune indicating that she needed to leave the room. Shizune, said apprentice turned towards her master, I'll be fine, go. Shizune turned towards the door and began to walk out, but she turned her head towards the Anbu with a stern glare. Anything happens to Tsunade-sama, you die. She walked out of the room and closed the door. Tsunade turned towards the Anbu who was pulling out a scroll. So, what does the old goat want? The Anbu passed her the scroll. She looked at it curiously and began to unroll it. She looked it over. When she finally got through it her eyes widened beyond all possible proportions. Outside of the room, Shizune was standing outside the door. It was too quiet to be normal. She was about to open the door. Crash, when it flew off its hinges as Tsunade charged out of the room. She turned towards her apprentice, Shizune, pack your bags, we are heading to Konoha now. She ran towards the lobby as the Anbu walked out of the room. What was that about? The Anbu passed her a scroll labeled to her. She opened it up and read its contents. Dear Shizune, no doubt you have seen Tsunade's reaction to the scroll she received. The scroll entailed details of a living user of the Mokuden blood limit. His name is Naruto Uzumaki. There is more information concerning him, but all the information is on Tsunade's scroll, and she is not to reveal it until I deem it permissible to do so. The reason I am telling you this is because no doubt Tsunade will try to use her funds to buy a menagerie of items for a certain reason. I want you to prevent her from doing that. She does not need more debts than she already has. Sincerely, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Shizune looked at the scroll for a minute, then it suddenly clicked. Shit, I have to stop Tsunade from going haywire on the shopping. Hold this, she threw the scroll to the Anbu who was now running after her. Next day, with Naruto and Sasori. Naruto and Sasori had left that morning. Naruto and him had shared a little bit about their pasts. When Sasori heard about Naruto's past he unleashed a mess of puppet fury on the surrounding trees. He was so angry. Most people didn't know, but Sasori had one weakness, children. He could not stand to see a child in pain, could not stand to see them sad, and now he finds a child who was often beaten to within an inch of his life, ridiculed and ostracized, and basically abused in both mental and physical perspective. It severely pissed him off. After Sasori had vented, the two had continued on their trek towards Suna. They were not actually going into Suna since Sasori was a missing nin, but he needed to greet his contact. Sasori had a massive spy network that was probably the most advanced and intricate in all of the elemental nations. The only one who could possibly have a better one was Jiraiya of the Densetsu no Sannin. The two arrived in a small town about a mile away from Suna's borders. The two found an abandoned building where they were to meet Sasori's contact. As the two waited, Sasori began to get Naruto to start working on his chakra control. Sasori-sensei, how is this supposed to help me get stronger? He indicated to the piece of string in his hand. Sasori sighed as he explained. The exercise is to increase your control. You have far too much chakra to suddenly start learning new things, for now I need you to start on the basics. The object of the exercise is to use your chakra to tie the string into a specific knot, and then use chakra to untie it. It is a difficult exercise, but we have no other way to increase your control for now. Sasori began to tinker with a sealing scroll as Naruto began to try and weave the string into a normal bow tie knot. The two waited in the abandoned building for 2 hours. Finally, when Sasori was beginning to lose his patience, Naruto yelled out, "Yada, I did it." Sasori looked to find that Naruto had in fact managed to do it. He was surprised. With chakra stores that were so large he could sense them without even trying. It was a spectacular feat, but then Sasori noticed something. There was a controlled swirl of chakra surrounding his navel. It was narrowing down how much chakra was being used. Sasori was about to ask Naruto about it when the door opened. Sasori turned his head. "Ah, Yura, you're here," said Suna Shinobi, simply kneeled in front of Sasori. "Sasori Dono, I am ready to make my report." Konaha, Uchiha compound. Funu was walking towards the Uchiha gates. She had made all preparations for the plan, the one that would bring the Uchiha clan to its knees. Her parents had foolishly left documents around before their deaths, and with her higher than normal IQ of 197, it was child's play for her to understand what the documents meant. She was smart for a 7-year-old. Although she had to thank the foolish Uchiha clan, had they not entrusted her idiot parents, parents who viewed themselves with such high reverence because of their bloodline that they became so arrogant that it was child's play to kill them, she would not have found a person who she could test herself against. Part of the Uchiha clan's plan to conquer Konoha involved Naruto. With the Kyuubi inside of him, any offspring he would have would become pseudo-Jinchuriki, a type of Jinchuriki that had all a Jinchuriki's strengths, but had less of the weaknesses. After she found out about Naruto having the Kyuubi inside of him, she followed him to see if her inborn power would do to him what Madara, her great-grandfather, did to the Kyuubi. But when she found him, beaten and bruised, left near dead, she could not bring herself to do it. She looked him over and found the wounds already healing, but she stayed by his side and did what she could to nurse him back to health. She was only 5 at the time she found him beaten near death, was only 5 when she began observing him every moment she could. She was only 5 when she made a vow, "I will make you mine, and I will be free of this pathetic clan for good." And now, she was betrothed to him. Now all she had to do was make sure that she was dominant in the group of girls that are lining up to have Naruto. She had no problem sharing. What she had a problem with was being submissive. Her plan was coming to fruition. It looked like that little tip that she slipped Itachi was successful. Now all she needed to do was let the pieces fall into place, and she would be the only Uchiha left alive, and the Sharingan, no, the perfect Sharingan, would belong to the Senju clan, and the Uchiha clan would fade into the pages of history. She thought about her ancestor. "Madara, you were a fool. You had the chance to gain a powerful bloodline when the Shodime's sister offered herself to you, but your arrogance blinded you to the truth. But soon, the gift you passed on to me will be in the Senju clan." Funu activated her eyes and spoke. "Ninpo, Shunshin no Jutsu." She disappeared in a swirl of black flames, going to a safe house, while the Uchiha clan was massacred. Kurama compound. Yukumo was painting in her room. Her father had told her she was to be betrothed to the heir of the Senju clan. She accepted, not caring in the slightest. She was far too depressed to care. A week ago her teacher had sealed up her Kekkei Genkei. She felt such betrayal, she regressed herself into a shell. Her parents were worried about her. They asked Kurenai why she sealed up her bloodline. Her only reply was, "She needs to learn control." Her parents tried to get her to explain, but Kurenai left before they could question her further. Lately Yukumo has been having constant nightmares where an Oni takes over her body and uses her to its own ends. This worried her parents, as it was a sign that the darker curse of her bloodline had finally come out. She only found solace in her paintings. Before she heard of the engagement, she painted scenes of darkness and pain, but after the engagement, she began to paint happier scenes of weddings, flowers, mountains. Yukumo was painting furiously, trying to get out what was so intently on her mind, but every time she made a brush stroke, she heard that same voice, "Let me." She tried to shake it off, but it kept coming. Finally, she began to lose consciousness as she tried to finish the painting. When her eyes snapped closed, she snored, her eyes opened, revealing glowing orbs. She suddenly picked up the brush and with a wicked smile began to paint a picture. She grinned wider with each second. She finally placed the brush down. Perfect. Suddenly Yukumo fell back to sleep as the painting was revealed. It was a painting of a burning Konoha with a silhouette of a wedding in the flames. The male had glowing crimson orbs, with a silhouette behind him, a silhouette of 9 tails. Time skip 3 days later. Naruto was trying to get the string to turn into different knots. So far he had managed to get it into a hangman's knot, a bow tie no, a sailor's knot, and a lace knot, but he was still having difficulty with the kunai wrap knot. Sasori had described that the knot was basically the wrapping around a kunai handle. But since he had to kunai handle, he had to make do with his finger, thus making it more difficult to properly channel the chakra through the fingertips. Naruto looked over the knot Sasori had made to see what he was missing. He looked it over as he checked to see where he was going wrong. He was channeling chakra through the string like Sasori had told him, but for some reason the knot kept undoing itself after he finished. Naruto began to wrap the string around his finger again. Suddenly he looked his finger over. He remembered in one of his sensei's lectures that there were tenketsu points in the entire body, and the more chakra on had, the more chakra points there were. Naruto tried to use his entire finger to make the knot. He smiled when he saw that it was a success. Yada. Sasori sensei, I got it. Sasori looked over to the blonde, astonished by his progress. Amazing. He has shown such great skill so soon. It's remarkable. I definitely found the right guy to be my apprentice. Now to start him on my techniques. Sasori walked over to Naruto. Very good. Come, we have 3 days to get started on the next point of your training. Sasori began walking towards a tree. He tapped on the tree, shook his head and moved on. He went to another tree, tapped it, shook his head again and moved on. He continued this for a few minutes until he stopped at a tree with a dark red wood. He tapped it, he nodded his head, he circled the tree and tapped it a couple times. Finally he smiled. Sasori pulled out a scroll and suddenly was surrounded in smoke. Naruto covered his eyes as the smoke swept over him. As the smoke cleared, he looked to where his sensei was. His eyes widened when he saw another figure with his sensei. There was what looked like a humanoid figure. Its arms were like that of a large zanbeitu, but were curved like a machete. It had empty eye sockets, but its mouth was filled with saws. The thing was wearing a crimson cloak, with a design of a red scorpion on it. Sasori was twitching his fingers. The humanoid object began to move. Suddenly it looked at the tree and swung its massive blade's arms. It then closed its mouth on the tree and began slicing it into wooden logs and planks. It began using its arms and sliced up the logs and planks into smaller bits. The logs and planks fell to the ground into a neat pile. Sasori pulled out his scroll and suddenly the object vanished. He put away the scroll and walked over to the wood. He began to inspect it. He turned towards the shocked Naruto. Naruto, come. He pulled out a scroll and opened it. The wood disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto slowly walked towards his sensei as they headed to a cave. When they got there, Sasori set up a fire using some of the wood that he deemed unfit for usage. Finally, when the two sat around the fire, Sasori spoke. Naruto, as you saw, my art revolves around puppetry. I will start you off with a simple design to work on. After that you will begin to design your own form of puppet. Once you have created a few decent, regular puppets, I will introduce you to the pinnacle of my art. Sasori unconsciously placed his hand over where his heart should be. Naruto was curious about this but chose to ignore it. For now, I wish you to create a simple battle puppet. Sasori pulled out a scroll and passed it to Naruto. Naruto looked at the scroll and opened it. Comma, 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 Sasori-sensei. Sasori looked at his new apprentice. Yes, what is it you require? Naruto looked away, as if he was ashamed of something. I can't read kanji. Sasori's eyes widened at this. For a child at 6 years old to not know how to read, it was barbaric. Sasori spent the day teaching Naruto how to read the scroll. Naruto finally got the hang of it and began to read it on his own after a while. The next morning Naruto began to use the wood and began to craft a battle puppet. The design was humanoid, but Naruto shaped the fingers to resemble talons. Naruto also carved in his own insignia. A Tenshinhan flower with red slitted eye in the middle of it. He did not know why he put it there. Naruto worked on the puppet for several days, applying gears and joints to where Sasori indicated. Finally, after 3 days of working on the puppet, it was now functional, at least from Naruto's perspective. The puppet resembled a simple mannequin. Its mouth was filled with sharpened teeth. Its shoulders had planks of wood that had a storage seal on each one. The hands were replaced with claws, each nail curved to resemble a talon. The eyes were red and had black slits in them. For some reason Naruto felt the need to place them there. Sasori inspected the puppet. He began using his chakra strings. He quickly got the handle of it, but he noticed that there were some quirks in the design, but he was not surprised. After all, Naruto did not know how to read until a few days ago. He looked towards his student. Well done, however, you made the bolts too tight on the left arm, and the neck movements are too loose, but besides that the design is quite good. Now, we will begin the next step. A week later, Naruto and Sasori were heading towards a village in the land of rivers. Sasori had made a contact in one of the major villages, and he was now awaiting the end part of the bargain. Naruto's outfit had changed a bit. He was no longer wearing rags. He now wore a long black poncho with tattered edges. The hood shadowed his entire face, as well as provided a way to shade oneself from the sun. Underneath the cloak he wore a wire mesh shirt and a set of black hakama pants. The poncho had 3 pouches, all 3 contained scrolls. One had his completed battle puppet, and the other 2 contained his new puppet designs. Both were works in progress. Sasori was now using his Hirako puppet. Naruto had wanted to know why it looked so much like a human, but Sasori had told him he would find out when he was older. Sasori wanted to wait until Naruto was skilled enough in puppetry before he dropped the bomb of human puppets on him. The two had entered the town. Naruto was holding a scroll at the ready. Sasori had told him to always be wary of others, and now that he was meeting a strange man that Sasori had told him he had only met through a various series of spy networks, he was extremely edgy. The two arrived at their intended destination. It was an old cave near a river. The cave was covered by a genjutsu. Sasori placed his palm near the cave entrance and the genjutsu dropped, revealing a beautiful pagoda door. The door opened as the two walked through it. When they entered, there was a light in the middle of the room with a man wearing a black cloak with red clouds standing to the side. His face was covered by a straw hat with bells on it. The man spoke with a stoic voice, "Akasuna no Sasori, I have what you asked for." He reached into his cloak and pulled out a scroll and passed it to Sasori. Said missing nin took the scroll and gave it to Naruto, who placed it in a pocket in his hakama pants. "I must thank you. Without your poisons I would not have been able to pull off my feat." Sasori chuckled a bit. In Hirako his voice became more gravely and aggravated. "Yes, I hope that you are not cheating me on my prize." The man shook his head. "No, unfortunately the item was damaged, missing parts of the right side. However, it looked like it had been removed intentionally." Sasori growled to himself. That means that someone has vital portions. No matter, I shall still find use for it." The man stepped back as Sasori turned to Naruto. "Naruto, no one noticed the monk's eyes widen. Please leave the room for a few moments." Naruto nodded his head and exited the room. Sasori looked back at the man. So, by the change in your chakra, and the stance you are in, you must know this boy. Said man looked down. Yes, I knew him before, I used to watch out for him on the Sandame's orders, he was such a nice boy. The man looked down as Sasori pondered. Yes, he is a nice boy, and he shows amazing potential in my art, hopefully he will surpass me before I expire. The man nodded his head. Well, I must be off. Also, Itachi reached into his cloak, I have a message for you, from my organization. Sasori took the scroll, you do not need to reply now, but it is highly suggested that you do at some point. Sasori nodded his head and put the scroll away. Thank you, Itachi Uchiha. Itachi smiled under his hat. No, thank you, Akasuna no Sasori. He disappeared in a swirl of leaves as Sasori turned towards the door, now having a body that his student can create his first human puppet with, the body of Shisui Uchiha. Kotetsu and Izumo were standing guard at the gates of Konoha. Ever since Tsunade's return 5 years ago they had been placed on guard duty constantly, she had taken up the position of Godime and had proceeded to punish every individual who had ever hurt Naruto. No one has been told the relation as far as blood between the two, but if he had the Mokuten then the two had to be related in some way, and that was more than enough reason for Tsunade to want vengeance. Kotetsu and Izumo had been spared from her wrath, they had never harmed Naruto, nor have they ever assisted him, now that they thought about it there was a lot more they could have done for the blonde. Kotetsu sighed, man, I really miss that Gaki. Izumo sighed as he slumped down. I know what you mean. Izumo then thought about something, hey, didn't the Sandame say that Naruto would be returning before the final year of the academy? Kotetsu perked up. Yeah, so he should be returning soon, I hope. Izumo cringed at the statement. Once Tsunade became Godime she had sent several leagues of Anbu to locate Naruto, they came back after 3 weeks, not finding anything in the slightest. They were about to fall asleep. Cling, they heard the ringing of bells. They looked down the road to see 2 individuals walking up to the gates, they were both wearing straw hats with bells hanging from the edges, and they were both wearing black cloaks, with red clouds. Akatsuki. Jiraiya had explained for everyone to watch out for them. Kotetsu and Izumo were about to get into battle position, when one of the individuals suddenly disappeared, they went wide-eyed before they felt a pressure at the back of their necks, as everything went dark. Tsunade's office. Tsunade was brushing through the documents as quickly as she could. Ever since she came back to the village she had been extremely edgy. Once she found out how her relative was treated she had gone completely nuts, in a matter of days she had managed to destroy several restaurants, level the orphanage, and destroy his old apartment complex. She had then proceeded to arrest every individual who had ever hurt Naruto, and it was a long list. She had personally done the DNA testing for Naruto, and what she found shocked her. Naruto's DNA matched that of her little brother, but how? Minato was not related to them, as far as she knew. Once she found out that Naruto had been living alone she had gone looking everywhere to find Kushina, she had even sent Anbu to look through the ruins of Uzugakure, to find nothing. She pondered to herself, where are you Kushina, if you abandoned your son, heads will roll. She sighed to herself as she was about to approve a new document. Tsunade. She looked up to find her old sensei standing there, how are you doing with your new position? Tsunade frowned at her old sensei, the two had been working together since she took the position, and she was finally starting to get the hang of it, but how the hell did the bag of bones ever manage to do all this paperwork and not go crazy with it? I am all right sensei, although, I wish that Naruto was here. The blood sample they used to test him with was at least 3 weeks old, and a fresh sample might produce better results. I want to know how closely he and I are related, it may answer some questions I have had for a few years. Sarutobi quirked an eye at her and sighed. Yes, I miss him too, I would give anything just to have him in this room right now. Even give up smoking, old man. The two shinobi turned around to find 2 individuals wearing Akatsuki cloaks standing in front of them. They immediately got into battle positions as Sarutobi spoke. Identify yourselves, or die. The two turned to each other and chuckled. The one standing next to the one that spoke sounded feminine. The male individual reached up to his hat and said, "Why, of course." He pulled off his hat to reveal his face. OGG, standing in front of the legendary medic ninja and the god of shinobi, was Naruto Uzumaki. Sarutobi could not contain himself. Naruto. He looked Naruto over. He had grown to an impressive 5 feet 2 inches. He had lost a good amount of his baby fat. His hair had grown a bit longer and it now resembled Minato's hairstyle. His eyes were still the same cerulean blue, but they now had a darker tinge to them. All in all, he looked like a true shinobi. Naruto noticed Sarutobi's shocked expression and smiled. "Hey old man, you better close your mouth before flies nest in there." He chuckled as Sarutobi quickly closed his mouth. "So, how has the village been, old man? I see you finally got yourself a replacement." Sarutobi chuckled at the blonde, but then turned his attention to the girl standing next to him, if the giggle he heard before was any indication of her gender. "Who is the young individual standing next to you?" Naruto turned towards the person and nervously smiled. "Well, I don't know how to say this, but she is the Kyuubi no Yoko." The two shinobi turned their heads towards Naruto, then the girl, then Naruto, then the girl. "What?" Naruto held onto his ears as he grumbled to himself. "Somehow I should have known that was going to happen." He waited for the two shinobi to stop hyperventilating before he explained how he met the Kyuubi. Flashback. Naruto was trying to focus his large chakra reserves to create enough strings to make his new puppet move. It was a large spider-like puppet that had specialized chakra leeching nets used for capture. The problem was that in the way the puppet was designed, it was impossible to fully control it with just the usual 10 fingers used for most puppetry, so he was trying to use the technique Sasori sensei used for his performance of 100 puppets. The problem was that he had so much chakra that he could barely do the regular 10 for more than 2 minutes before he collapsed in exhaustion. He was now sitting and meditating, trying to focus his chakra like Sasori suggested. He said it was something he learned from a traveling monk. Naruto had been sitting in the same position for half an hour trying to focus his chakra. Finally he sighed, "This isn't working, man, is there any other way for this to work?" He opened his eyes, expecting to see lush green forests, but instead he found himself in a sewer with vines randomly crossing over the walls. Where the hell am I? He quickly jumped up and began to walk through the hallways. He looked around until he came to a door. It was practically calling him. Not thinking, he opened the door and looked inside. There was a massive cage that looked like it was being closed shut by a large mass of vines. Well, so my container comes to greet me. I was wondering when you would be coming here." Naruto felt the ground tremble as he heard the loud voice. He looked into the cage as steam began to come out from between the bars. Naruto's eyes widened as a toothy grin appeared along with a set of glowing crimson orbs. "So, to what do I owe this pleasure, little one?" Naruto looked up at the creature as more of its body was revealed. "Kei Kyuubi no wa Yoko." The Kyuubi smiled as it winked at Naruto. "Correct. You aren't as dumb as I thought you were. We should probably talk in a more comfortable environment." The smirk on Kyuubi's features made the blonde incredibly nervous. Suddenly the Kyuubi began to shrink as it began to take a new form. When the Kyuubi finished its transformation, there was a human figure laying on the ground. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw it, or rather her features. She had crimson red hair that fell to the small of her back. She had a pale complexion, long slender arms, a perfect hourglass figure, and an impressive set of. She looked to be about 15 years old. As she stood up, she revealed her whole form, completely. Naruto blushed crimson red as her stared into her crimson eyes. She must have seen the blush because she playfully giggled as she placed a finger at her lips, making her look even cuter. "So, do you like what you see?" Naruto did not know whether it was her looks in general, or if it was how she said it, but he did the first thing that seemed logical. He fainted. If you people are having any trouble with Kyuubi's human form, Just think Mocha from Rosario Vampire with crimson hair and red slitted eyes. End flashback. Sarutobi stared at the blonde, having a hard time believing what he said, but then again, Naruto hasn't lied to him as of yet, so, how did she escape from the seal? Naruto sighed. He opened his mouth, probably about to answer, when the door was opened by a frantic Hiashi Hyuga. Hokage-sama, 2 Akatsuki members have been spotted at. He looked around as he saw that there were several individuals in the room. He then saw the Akatsuki cloaks. Hokage-sama, why are there 2 Akatsuki members in your office? Hiashi looked at Tsunade expectantly. Tsunade opened her mouth to answer, when she suddenly felt a large mass of killing intent, coming from Naruto. Naruto was glaring at Hiashi with a look that would possibly scare Orochimaru. You. He performed a set of hand seals and pulled out a scroll. The scroll released a bath of white smoke as a puppet came flying out of it. Hiashi was so shocked that he had no time to move. He watched as the puppet came at him and noticed its features. It was very skeletal. Its mask was like that of a ghoul. Its cloak was tattered and ruined. And it was carrying a massive scythe. He was about to get into a Juken stance. Stop. The puppet stopped in mid-strike. He looked to see that the other Akatsuki member, a beautiful 15-year-old woman with crimson eyes, was holding on to the now crazed Naruto. Naruto, calm down, calm down. Naruto blinked a few times as his crazed look softened. He withdrew the puppet and sealed it back into a scroll. Naruto walked out of the room. As he passed by Hiashi, he whispered, "I am sorry." He left the room and walked down the hallway, Kyuubi following close behind. Hiashi looked at Tsunade with a look that said, "What the fuck just happened?" The 3 shinobi looked down, wondering what the hell was going on. That night, with Naruto. After Naruto had left the office, he had walked around the village. He had seen that there were a few changes to the village. But not enough so that he forgot the places he was beaten in. He looked down an alley. It was the last place he was beaten before he left for his training trip. He had walked around the village until he made it to the top of the Hokage monument. He looked at the village as he revealed a seal over his heart. He ran a bit of blood over it, unsealing the Tenshinhan flower. He examined it for a minute as he looked at it through the moonlight, wondering if the Tenshinhan's legends in regards to the full moon were actually true. Since the flower had not yet opened at night, nor was it a full moon, he could not say for sure. He began to trim and comb the flower, making sure that it was perfectly cared for so that when she came to Konoha he could properly present it to her. Meanwhile, in the daimyo's palace, Mitsuki was looking at the moon, thinking to herself. She had been doing this ever since she had told Naruto that if the Tenshinhan flower was grown properly she would come to Konoha and marry him, but when she found out that he had left Konoha she was very upset. She often thought of what he must look like now. Her fantasies often brought the 13-year-old to very inappropriate places. She looked at the pond where her and Naruto had hung out for the day. She had cried there for over an hour when she heard that Naruto had left the village. She had finally stopped crying when her father had told her that she would be the first one he told if he got any new information on Naruto. She walked over to her bed and fell on it as she slowly allowed sleep to claim her. Her sleep was interrupted when she heard her father yell, "Mitsuki, Naruto is back in Konoha." She then flew out of bed and ran for her closet, looking for the best possible dress so she could properly present herself to the blonde, unaware that there were 3 girls in Konoha doing the exact same thing. The next day, with Naruto. Naruto was running through the exercises Sasori had taught him. He had finally managed to learn enough about puppetry that he could use his more advanced puppets. He could not, however, control more than 2 puppets at a time. He was now practicing in using his newest puppet, Fuin. It was probably his most useful puppet. It was covered in seals that could hold just about anything. In fact, he had essentially made the puppet more of a portable base than anything else. Thanks to a large amount of advancements, it could transform into a base for a small battalion. He looked the puppet over. The puppet itself was in the form of a barrel. However, The body was covered in many storage seals. The arms were also covered in storage seals, all in the entire puppet was like a large ant. He was inspired by Sasori sensei's design for Kurori, black ant, albeit his own design was a bit bulkier. Naruto sealed up his puppet and went to reach for another puppet to modify and train with. When he touched a black scroll, he traced the scorpion design on the side and whispered, "Sasori sensei." He then looked at the scroll next to it. It was also black, but it had the design of a hawk with broken wings. He immediately grew angry as he looked at it. He sighed and reached for a scroll, when an Anbu with a cat mask appeared in front of him. She had long purple hair and had a slender figure. "Naruto Uzumaki, the council wishes to see you immediately." She quickly shunshined away from the blonde as he began to walk towards the Hokage tower. Meanwhile, Mitsuki was riding her horse right through the gates of Konoha, not even bothering to watch out for who was in the way, all the time yelling, "Get out of my way." Meanwhile her parents, Sora, daimyo of High no Kuni, and his wife, Natara, were following up at a more steady pace with a small entourage of samurai nearby. Natara looked down as she face-palmed. "Oh boy, she is really excited right now. I wonder if we should have waited to tell her that Naruto came back to Konoha." Her husband looked down as he sighed. "Perhaps, but I don't think you want to be the one with snakes crawling underneath your covers." Natara shivered. She often wondered if Mitsuki got her obsession with snakes from hanging with her uncle, at least before he defected from Konoha. True, I curse Orochimaru for letting his niece sign that damn snake contract, but then again it was a family heirloom. The two saw that Mitsuki was getting too far ahead and proceeded to speed up the pace of their horses. Meanwhile, three girls were heading to the Hokage tower to meet the man they were pledged to. Several minutes later, with Naruto. Naruto was walking up the steps of the Hokage tower. He was about to turn a corner, Naruto-kun. He was barreled over by a certain red-haired demoness. He looked up at the Kyuubi and twitched. "Kyuubi, where the hell have you been?" Kyuubi got off of him and smiled. "Oh, you see, I went to the hot springs for a dip. But they were so nice and comfortable that I fell asleep in there. Sorry for making you worry, Naruto-kun." She wrapped him up in a hug and positioned his face in between her. Naruto began waving his arms around as he began to lose the ability to breathe. Finally Kyuubi stopped giving him the pleasurable hug of breathlessness, and finally released him. He got up and began taking deep breaths. "Okay, just don't worry me like that again, okay?" She nodded her head and did a mock salute. "Yes sir." Naruto face-palmed as they began to walk to the council chamber. Naruto knew the Hokage tower like the back of his hand, so it was no problem getting around. When they finally found the council chamber, he did what he normally did and just kicked the door right in. "I am here, what do you want?" The council looked at the blonde and his companion as he simply walked into the council chambers like he owned the place. He sat in a chair on the side of the wall as Kyuubi sat in the one next to him. "So, what am I here for?" Suddenly the doors were thrown off their hinges when Tsunade came barging through it, Sarutobi following close behind, and began yelling at the council. "What the hell were you all thinking? How dare you do something like that the moment he leaves the village to train for a few years?" The council began to shiver as Tsunade released a massive amount of killing intent. Naruto looked at Tsunade with a shocked and confused expression. What the hell is going on here?" Tsunade turned to Naruto and sighed. "Naruto, I think it would be best if you sat down for this." She passed him a bottle of sake. "I know you are underage, but once you hear what the council has to say, you are definitely going to need it." He nervously took the bottle of sake and looked at it quizzically. Thanks, I guess." He slowly edged to the seat he was assigned to and sat down. All the clan heads looked at him. He was about to say something when Sarutobi's old Kunoichi teammate stood up. "Naruto Uzumaki, as I am sure you know, you are the last remaining user of the Mokuden blood limit, as well as the user of a paper bloodline that we have decided to call." She was cut off by Naruto. "Origami no Jutsu." The council looked at Naruto quizzically. "The art is origami no jutsu. It is an aim no Kuni style of fighting that uses the bloodline of Ranbunhada, or paper body. The council looked at him as if he had grown a second head. He began to massage his temples. I went through aim no Kuni and met my aunt, Konan Uzumaki. She says that her and her twin sister were separated when their parents divorced. Apparently my mother's name is Kushina Uzumaki. What? The yell came from the clan heads. All of them going bug-eyed at the name. Shibi, surprisingly, was the first to voice his concerns. You mean that he is the son of Kushina? Then that means, Shibi's glasses fell from his node, revealing his compound eyes as he fainted from shock. Hiyashi was surprisingly the one who continued. He is Minato's son. Shit. Hiyashi also proceeded to pass out. Sum stood up and shouted at the Sandaime. You bastard, you told us he was dead. Sarutobi looked down as he explained. Minato had too many enemies, and Iwa would love nothing more than to get their hands on Naruto. I did what I thought was right to keep him safe. He looked towards Naruto, who was confused. Not that I am not enjoying you all yelling at each other, but who is Minato? If he is my father, I have a right to know. Naruto looked at the Sandaime with an expectant look. Look, Naruto, would love to tell you who your father is, but your father had too many enemies and they would love nothing more than to kill you. Naruto glared at the Sandaime and indicated to the civilian council. And having my own village try to kill me is much better. I would rather be in danger from outside enemies than inside enemies. And if my parents are alive, I would like to know, please. Sarutobi saw the look in his eyes. It was not one he had ever seen on the blonde, it was desperation. He sighed as he answered Naruto's question. Naruto, your father, was Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, the one who sealed Kyuubi inside of you. Naruto had a blank look on his face as he stared at the Sandaime. What? Naruto exploded, releasing chakra in such high amounts it was visible. The council was so shocked by his chakra output that they were not able to prepare for the shockwave that came with it. Naruto began to grind his teeth together as he began to angrily ramble. You mean to tell me that my own father condemned me to a life of hell? Exclamation mark. What the fuck kind of father would do that to his own son? Aagh. He fell into his chair and sighed, bitching and moaning about it isn't going to help me. The council looked at the blonde as he then looked back at the council. So, if I may ask, why the hell was I brought here in the first place? Council looked at him. Tsunade decided to answer for him. The council, in its infinite wisdom, chose to have you arranged to marry 3 young girls from the Uchiha, Hyuga, and Kurama clans. Naruto's eyes bugged out. He then reached for the bottle of sake, corked off the top and then drank it as quickly as he could. He then screwed back on the top as he looked at the council. Meanwhile, outside the council chambers, Funu Uchiha, Hinata Hyuga, Yakumo Kurama, and Mitsuki were standing outside the council room doors. Hinata was being escorted by her mother, Funu was walking alone, Yakumo was being escorted by her grandfather, and Mitsuki was being escorted by the daimyo. They were about to open the doors when they heard a loud yell of what? The group looked at the doors as a single thought went through their heads, what is going on here? Naruto was releasing so much killing intent that he actually made a few older shinobi counselors soil themselves. Are you telling me that I leave for a few years, and without my consent you all arrange marriages for me with girls that I have never even met? What the fuck is wrong with you people? Hiyashi Hyuga stood up. Naruto, since you are the last of your clan, you need to be betrothed to several women to rebuild your clan. The fact that they are of high standing will improve your clan's image. Naruto snarled at Hiyashi. Who asked you, white eyes? A better question would be, who the fuck asked me if they could betroth me to anyone? Exclamation mark. Did anyone here ever consider that I don't want to rebuild my clan? Everyone was shocked by his statement, and even if I did, I want to marry for love, not for some screwed up politics, you assholes. Naruto turned towards the doors of the council chamber. He turned back to the council, and by the way, I already have someone in mind for a possible wife. He opened the door, expecting to be able to walk home, but what he saw in front of him made his jaw drop. There were 4 absolutely beautiful girls standing at the front of the council room, all of them wearing illustrious kimonos. The girl to the far left was wearing a black kimono with ornate flaming designs running up the cloth. Her hair was tied back in a regal ponytail. Her lips had a luscious red lipstick to it. Her eyes were perfectly shaded, a deep midnight black. She carried herself with an authoritative stance that would be worthy of a true kunoichi. The girl standing next to her had beautiful dark purple, and was wearing a white kimono with feathers coming from a raven as a design. Her lips had a slight tint to show a small amount of makeup. Her eyes were like the hyuga heads, but they were a softer lavender color. She carried herself with a shy stance, but he could see an underlying potential in her. The girl next to her was stunning. She had a pale complexion, as well as stunning dark red hair, almost a brownish color to it. She was wearing an earthen kimono with ornate vines crawling up the side. Her lips were lightly tinted red, and she had a small amount of blush. She carried herself with a calm, tranquil stance. The last girl left him speechless. The girl was wearing a lovely green kimono with beautiful ornate serpents along the designs, stitching and hemming. Her hair was a silky black and her eyes were golden with snake-like slits. She carried herself with a clearly excited stance. He knew who she was. After all, she was the one who gave him the Tenshinhan flower. Naruto stared at all 4 beautiful girls and he began to stutter. Ah, ma, humana, ha, thump, and he fainted. Hinata, Funu, Yakumo, and Mitsuki looked at Naruto. They suddenly turned to each other and screamed, "Look what you did to him." The girls began to bicker and argue as their escorts sighed to themselves. This is going to be more difficult than we thought, isn't it? They all watched as the girls continued to bicker as Kyuubi picked up Naruto and carried him back into the council room. After they had managed to get the girls settled down, they had all re-entered the council chambers. Kyuubi had managed to wake up Naruto, but she was currently trying to convince Naruto to remain long enough to at least consider the benefits, and she was currently failing. Kyuubi, look, I understand where you are going with this, and the fact of the matter is that I do not wish to accept the CRA. Naruto-kun, this will help your clan, and, Naruto cut her off. Look Kyuubi, I know you think this will benefit me in the future, but the fact of the matter is that I refuse to marry anyone unless I hold genuine feelings for them. Kyuubi sighed as she looked at Naruto. Then for now, accept the CRA but only allow girls who genuinely care for you, and that you care for as well be with you, does that suffice? Naruto looked at her to retort, but sighed, he was going nowhere with this. Fine, I will take the CRA, under the conditions that the girls that I marry have to genuinely care for me. I will look them over for any seals that are forcing them to do this and I will immediately remove them. If I see even the smallest amount of deception in their eyes I will not even look in their direction, am I clear? The clan heads nodded while the civilians muttered to themselves. Sarutobi stood up. Besides that fact, Naruto, what exactly did you train in for the past 5.5 years? Naruto looked at Sarutobi and smiled. Well, I studied puppetry, as you saw in your office. Sarutobi smiled while Hiashi shivered. I also studied sealing, bojutsu, various ninjutsu, oh yeah, summoning and, he was immediately silenced when the entire council yelled. Summoning. Naruto cringed at the loud noise as he sighed. Yes, summoning. I got the contract when I went through Mushi Pass. Shibi Aburame gasped when he mentioned Mushi Pass. But, Mushi Pass is a deadly area filled with dozens of insect species that no one has ever been able to control, much less survive. Naruto looked at Shibi and sighed. That's because the insects in Mushi Pass are summon animals, just like the toads on MT. Myobokuzan. Everyone looked at Naruto. What, you thought all summon animals came from some sort of alternate dimension? The clan heads looked down while the civilian council quirked an eyebrow. Naruto slapped himself in the face. Man, well, I am sure you want to know how I got the scroll, I was walking through the forest with my sensei. The two of us got separated. I ended up in the Mushi Pass when I tried to look for him, and man was it hell going through that place. Flashback. Naruto ducked as a large wasp came flying at him. He used his bow staff and swatted it out of the way. He then ducked again as another wasp came hurtling at him. Damn it, no wonder people hate these things. Naruto swatted away another giant bug as he pulled out Vanguard. He had since modified his first puppet and it was now his favorite puppet. He used his bow staff as a mount as he jammed it into a wall. He jumped up on the bow staff and swung his puppet at the insects. He sliced a few in half. The insects just kept coming at him. Damn, where the hell are all these things coming from? Naruto turned around as he swatted another one away. He looked around as he saw another group of the massive insects heading towards him. He mentally cursed, shit, can this get any worse? Suddenly the ground he was standing on shattered beneath him as he fell downwards. He began sliding down a slick gooey substance. He finally found an end as he crash-landed into a slimy pool of whatever the hell he was in. He pushed to the surface as he began to spit out the substance which managed to get into his mouth. Ack, what the hell is this shit? Naruto opened his eyes, and they widened when he saw what he was in. He was in a nest. He looked to find large eggs, about the size of a toddler. He began to stand up. He looked around to find the cave covered with large flowers that seemed to move. He waded to the edge of the pool of slime and crawled out, gasping for breath as he did. Damn, what the hell is this place? He pushed himself up as he looked around. He was in some sort of catacomb. He began to walk around when he began to notice all the insect life. If there are more bugs down here, I better be careful. Naruto took a step forwards. Crunch, and he looked down. He had stepped on what looked like a giant tick, but it had a stinger at the end of it, and it had a small set of wings developing. Naruto was about to step again, when he heard the loud shriek behind him. He quickly turned around to see the walls moving. The rocks, which apparently were not rocks, began to fold into the wall. The wall began to crumble as Naruto saw the giant creature. It had to be the biggest bug he had ever seen in his life. It had the form of a massive wasp, but it had long front legs like a praying mantis, and it had massive wings. The insect opened its eyes, showing crimson orbs. It saw where Naruto's foot was and shrieked. It scuttled over to Naruto where it tried to impale him on its spiked tail. Naruto swerved out of the way and slammed the bug in the face, making his own body shake with the vibrations. He managed to gain enough of his own movement back so he could avoid a strike from the insect's frontal claws. He jumped out of the way and threw a kunai at the bug. It bounced off of its armor. Naruto cursed, shit, this thing has to have a weak point. Think Naruto, it's just a big bug, it has the same anatomical features and, oi duh, why the hell didn't I think of that before? Naruto ran towards the bug as it began to flap its massive wings. As it was about to jump off the ground, Naruto drove the bow staff into the insect's incredibly soft wings. He then tore upwards, shredding the wing. The insect fell to the ground as Naruto dealt a strike to its abdomen. The insect fell over and lay limp on the ground. Naruto was about to walk away, when he suddenly heard scuttling. He turned around to look into the shadows, and his eyes widened at what he was seeing. There were large beetles coming at him, but they seemed to be going at a steady pace. His eyes widened when he realized why they were going so slow. He now admits, the bug he was fighting was not the biggest he had seen. Slowly a massive form was revealed. The head was similar to that of a queen termite, but it had rhinoceros beetle horns, 3 to be exact. Its legs seemed to be gangly, but it had 6 massive pincers up front that looked like they could cut through stone. As more of the insect was revealed, he noticed large green pods on its back. Suddenly one of the pods exploded as a worm-like creature fell to the ground. It squirmed for a minute while it began to move towards one of the pools. The insect began to raise itself as Naruto noticed that the end of its body was connected to what appeared to be a massive sac. The flowers he saw in the cave began to light up. and his eyes widened in horror. The sack that the insect was connected to went deep into the catacombs and circled around the nearby sludge pools as they poured out more sludge. He stared into the insect's compound eyes. He could have sworn he heard a hissing sound come from it before it directed its attention to the insect that Naruto had just barely defeated. It began to click and hiss at the insect. The insect responded by hissing and clicks as well. The two continued this until the massive insect, which had to be big enough to be a boss summon, directed its attention to the wall behind Naruto. It began to click rapidly, and before Naruto knew it, he was being wrapped in webbing. He tried to struggle, but he fell over as he saw what was wrapping him up. The flowers on the ceiling and walls were actually massive spiders about the size of a man. They finished wrapping him up as another insect came crawling up to him. It sat near the base of Naruto's neck and began to leak out a digestive fluid that ate at Naruto's flesh. Naruto hissed in pain and tried to struggle, but he was being held down by the spiders. Meanwhile, the insect dropped a single egg into the hole as it began to secrete a saliva-like substance that closed up the hole. The pain then began to crawl up his spine until the pain skyrocketed in his brain. The spiders let go of Naruto, but immediately he felt incredible pain at the base of his neck. It felt like someone was drilling into his spinal cord. He suddenly began to interpret the clicks and hisses into words. The process seems to be working, quite interesting. And he is quite resilient. He may in fact be worthy. He kept hearing these noises and words until the pain finally stopped. He groaned in pain as the spiders began to cut the webbing around him. He suddenly heard chuckling. He looked to find that it was coming from the massive insect. I see, you are strong, but we do not know if you are worthy of the gift we wish to dispose upon you. We shall see through your memories. Suddenly Naruto saw every last pain that had ever happened to him. He heard the other insects' clicks, growls, and their screams as he saw all of his memories. But why were they screaming? Suddenly the memories stopped flooding through his mind. He looked up to see the insects looking down, and they were shaking as if they were crying. Suddenly he heard the giant insect sob out, "You have suffered so much, yet you do not strike back. You hold good in your heart. You are worthy." The insect waved its massive front claws as another insect came crawling out of the wall, carrying a massive scroll on its back. Naruto looked at the insect in confusion. "What are you talking about?" The insect spoke up. "We are the insect summons. For over 300 years we have guarded the scroll of our family, thinking that none would ever come to be worthy of signing it. You, however, are worthy of that honor." The insect carrying the contract placed it in front of Naruto and began to unfurl it. On the scroll were 5 names: Andre Aburame, Karamu's Kamizuru, Lilinette Arthaghost, Hiyori Kitamura, and Zephon Segmist. Those individuals were the only ones to ever sign our contract, and each one took a clan away from the contract. The Aburames took the Kikaichu, the Kamizuru took the bee family, the Arthaghost took the rhinoceros beetles, Kitamura took the tarantulas, and Segmist took the termites. Each of the clans taken was essentially kidnapped, but we have not been able to find them. Naruto looked at the first name, Aburame, so a clan from Konoha had kidnapped the Kikaichu originally. "And you want me to have this honor, when you have already lost 5 clans?" The insect nodded its head as it answered. "Yes, I do." Naruto stood and placed his hand over his heart. "Then I swear to you, I will find the wayward clans, and I will try to bring them back for you. What is your name?" The insect seemed to smile, if it was possible for mandibles to make a smile at least. "My name is Kabutomushi." End flashback. After that I met back up with my sensei. By all dumb luck he had managed to capture a Segmist and an Arthaghost, and both were the current holders of the scrolls. He clan heads looked at Naruto in shock, but the Aburame head looked down. "But we have grown so attached to our Kikaichu, must you really take them from us?" Naruto gave Shibi a serious look. "Perhaps if I speak to Kabutomushi-sama, I might be able to work out an agreement, but the other 2 contracts must be returned." Shibi sighed as he began to pray that this, Kabutomushi would allow his clan to continue using the Kikaichu. Suddenly a civilian council member spoke up. "Who was your sensei, boy?" Naruto looked down with a sad expression. My sensei. Naruto's eyes began to water. The clan heads saw this and all of them thought, what happened to his sensei? Clearly the civilians did not see this nor did they care, as one of them, a pink-haired woman yelled out. Stop stalling, brat, and tell us who your sensei was. He couldn't have been all that great, seeing as he is not here with you. If he was so great he would have come with you. And the woman was silenced by a blast of killing intent from the blonde. My sensei was Akasuna no Sasori, and I had the misfortune of watching him die. He let up on the killing intent and sat down. The council began to whisper in shock, while Danzo stood up. Lord Hokage, surely someone as skilled as him would make a fine addition to my root division. He has the Mokuton, an Omegakure bloodline limit, and he was trained by Akasuna no Sasori, the greatest Suna ninja to ever come from their ranks. As such, I request that he be placed in my root division. Danzo was mentally sneering at the boy, who 2 years ago had foiled his plans at an alliance with Hanzo. Naruto glared at Danzo and spoke, "Oh really, Danzo, and why per se would allow you to be my leader, when you had the gall to try and kill my aunt?" Everyone turned to Danzo, who was now sweating bullets. He knew I was there. How? I saw him fighting Anzo head on. How did he manage to see me from that distance? Danzo spoke up as calmly as he could. I have no idea what you are talking about. Naruto snorted as he turned towards the old war hawk. Whatever. Besides, I promised Ogg that I would attend the last year of the academy. He turned to Sarutobi. Am I correct? Sarutobi smiled at the blonde as he answered. True, Naruto, you did in fact promise that. Sarutobi turned towards the council. I see no issue in that, do any of you? The clan heads shook as a sign they did not disagree. The civilians grudgingly agreed, meanwhile Danzo was fuming. Damn, his power would have given me the strength to take you down, Sarutobi. Now how am I going to take the position of Hokage? Sarutobi smiled. Tomorrow, Naruto will start the academy. He began to write down a form. This is the room number. Naruto took the piece of paper and smiled at Sarutobi. Thanks, Ogg. He and Kyuubi shunshined out of the council chamber. Later that night, with Funu. Funu was cursing to herself. Her plans were slowly falling through the toilet. She was not the last remaining Uchiha as she had planned. Instead, that pathetic excuse of a genius had spared his worthless little brother, leaving 3 Uchiha living. Funu looked at the training post that had a symbol carved into it. Her eyes changed from her regular eyes into the Sharingan, and then they shifted into the biohazard symbol, Amaterasu. And a black flame shot from her eyes, destroying the dummy that had the symbol of the Uchiha clan carved into it. She began pacing as she thought to herself, damn it, my plans are slowly being destroyed. Not only is that pathetic excuse of an Uchiha still alive, but also Naruto-kun will only marry for love. I have to worm my way into his heart, but how? I know I care for him, but I have no idea how to show it. She sat next to a tree in the apartment she had bought after the Uchiha massacre. She had managed to smuggle a large amount of scrolls from the compound before Sasuke got a hold of them. This gave her an advantage. Not only was Sasuke stuck with the most pathetic Uchiha clan justices, but he was also so hell-bent on revenge that he would never be able to properly learn them. She smirked to herself, I will not be defeated, my dear Naruto-kun. She walked upstairs, ready to prepare for the next day at the academy. Next day, the academy class was waiting for their teachers. All of them were extremely anxious since their parents had told them that they were to receive a new classmate. And not just any classmate, a senju who has the Mokudan. Sasuke was brooding. On the inside, however, he was scheming. I will defeat this Dobi, and I will make him teach me his justices, so I can kill him. Hinata was quivering. She knew who it was, and it made it that much harder to get out of bed, but she wanted to gain Naruto's affection. Funu was thinking of possible ways to get Naruto to fall for her. Kiba was looking at Hinata with lust. I will beat this new Dobi and I will show Hinata-chan that I am the man for her. Yes, Kiba will be bashed in this fic. Why? Because it is funny. Sakura was oogling Sasuke. Whoever this boy is, he will never beat my Sasuke-kun, cha Shanaru. The doors opened as Iruka Yumino and Mizuki Dao walked through the doors. Alright class, I am pleased to announce that we have a new student today. Please treat him with the same respect you wish him to give you. The doors opened again as Naruto stepped through them. The class had mixed reactions. Hinata was blushing at him. Kiba was snarling when he saw the blush. Sakura was humping at the sight of him. Sasuke was looking at him as if he was a pole to be measured. Funu was looking at him with a seductive smirk. The reactions continued until he spoke. Hello everyone, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, I hope we can all get along.